Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. But before anything else, I would like to congratulate PSF for organizing this summit and bringing some very distinguished speakers, people who have actually excelled in their professions to address you, to interact with you, to take your questions. I'm happy that this event is happening here. And I just was going through the literature about PSF. And again, I'm very glad to see that so many young professionals in particular have joined this forum. In fact, I have always seen this and believed this, that true professionalism comes by listening to experiences of others, understanding what is it that they have done, which I can also replicate, I can also emulate. And I'm happy that this kind of a platform has been created. So I'll share again some observations about the nature of professionalism, the nature of work, the future of work in particular. In our country, actually all across the world, in the last 2.5 years or so, things have been disrupted quite a lot, which also includes the nature of work relationships between an employer and an employee. And as I walked in, all of you were discussing these issues of freelancing or moonlighting, as it is called. And this again is a phenomena which has surfaced just in the last couple of years, etc. And again, there are different views on it. I mean, from the panel discussion itself, you can make out that in some sense it is good as well. Normally we try to portray it as a phenomena which is not ethical, which compromises the core businesses of your main employer. But again, there's a flip side to it as well. But I will not go into it, but I'll again come back to the main point that lots of changes have happened in which the work is organized, in which SLAs are expected, deliveries are expected, the nature of working in teams. Lots of changes have happened, and some of the things that I have observed, I would like to kind of point your attention as well to those trends. So many of you will recall that the first lockdown in India, it started in March 2020, and it was a pretty harsh lockdown. Many of you will again recall that it happened very suddenly. The Prime Minister came on the television and told us that from the next day onwards, next morning onwards, there'll be complete shutdown. So in Hyderabad, as all of you would know, we have a very thriving and a very large IT industry. In that time, there were close to 650,000 people who were working in the IT companies here. And you can't shut down an IT company just like that. They have contracts, they have deliverables, they're responsible for so many of their clients who are in other parts of the world. So you just can't tell that you stop working from tomorrow. So obviously they had to transition to their homes, and it was a big challenge. In fact, during the first few weeks of lockdown, if your thoughts can go back to March 2020, maybe April 2020, things were pretty difficult. In fact, it was a curfew-like situation, and directions had been given to the police that anyone seen outside without any purpose, you have to just be very ruthless with them, merciless with them. So imagine shifting 650,000 people back to their homes, ensuring that they carry all the hardware which they're authorized to work with, and all the approvals and permissions are taken. Telecom companies improve the bandwidth in the residential areas, and despite getting split from a central office, the teams that have to interact, they continue to work. In those days, collaboration tools were not very common. Of course, now we all are familiar with multiple kinds of collaboration tools, but initial days, it was all very new. Now, in Hyderabad, it was done quite successfully as compared to other cities. But if you actually ask IT companies, the IT leaders here in Hyderabad, the company heads, etc., the center heads, they always tell one thing, that the people who helped us do this are not our brightest coders or the brightest developers or the senior most people, but they comment, and this is a comment or an experience sharing from many IT leaders. Almost 50-60 people would have told this to me, that we identified people who actually are not supposed to do these kind of things. They are not the facilities manager, or they are not the operational managers, they are not the HR leaders. But we found that some employees of ours, they chose to go beyond the call of duty and helped us in getting police permissions, getting the vehicles organized, getting the hardware shifted, and also assuring the employees that we can still continue to work. There is a disruption for sure, but it doesn't mean that we kind of surrender to it. And these are the people who are today valued the most in that company. So your ability to write code or lead a team, etc., of course is valued, but the ability to really help in the time of a crisis, going beyond your call of duty, taking responsibility, even if you're not given any extra benefit for that. See, lots of people are moonlighting because they get additional salaries, additional bonuses, etc. But during COVID time, there was no kind of expectation that if I help 50 of my colleagues go to, let us say, Dilsukh Nagar with their laptops and all that and settle down properly, I'll be given some additional bonus or anything. There was no such belief, and no bonuses were given also. But the recognition that there are such people who can really step in when the situation demands, who are prepared to go beyond the call of duty. So this is one trait which is getting valued quite a lot. And I'm very sure that in future also, while good coders, good developers, etc., are going to be valued for sure, but much more value will be attached to people who show this kind of altruistic trait, people who are prepared to kind of step in without expectation of anything else. And I have again, in fact, this morning only, I was with a very senior HR leader. She's the head of the HR in one of the business units in Cognizant in Hyderabad. We were in a social event in the morning. And she was telling me that now when we conduct interviews, job interviews, we start looking at these kind of traits. We don't ask what is your GPA or how many lines of code have you written. I mean, all those things might be asked, but much more deeper questions are on these kind of things. This is one issue which I wanted to bring to your knowledge. The second very important thing, again, it happened in the second wave actually. Again, many of you will recall, sorry, not in the second wave, towards the later part of the first wave. Again, after, let us say, April, May, June, etc. You would have seen it has happened in all the large cities in our country, including Hyderabad. Lots of migrant workers physically walking back. And in my personal opinion, nothing can be more tragic than this. Imagine, and they're not walking, it's not like a casual walk that you take for 1 hour or 2 hours or so. They have to walk for days altogether. And many people actually walk for 20 days, 25 days, 30 days to reach the last particular place. Now, what has been seen is that it's a human tragedy. People could have kind of foreseen it. They could have kind of planned for it. But for some reason, at the Prime Minister's level, the decision was announced all of a sudden. These kind of thoughts perhaps were not evaluated properly. But the reality is that hundreds of people, thousands of people, millions of people, they lost hope. They felt that the only way to survive is to reach back my home place, which again is not something which is giving them a great opportunity in the past also. Otherwise, they would have not left that place to come to Hyderabad or Bombay or Bangalore or wherever. But they chose to walk back. But what is very remarkable is the kind of help and solidarity that was shown. And I know of many people here in Hyderabad who again are people who are not formally involved. For example, in their companies, they are not the CSR head, or they are not someone who runs some kind of charity programs, etc. But despite not having any formal responsibility, any formal position, I know of again of at least 200-300 such cases where employees, professionals, they kind of stepped forward. They took the responsibility of providing some relief for the other. And again, without any expectation, because this is a human tragedy, nothing is expected at that time except to just help the other fellow human being. At the end of it, we did recognize them. In fact, we called them COVID warriors, and officially on behalf of the government, we recognized them, which of course is an afterthought. But when the people involved were doing this aspect of charity, and all this was completely on a voluntary basis. In fact, I remember, because as you know, earlier this year we completed 75 years of independence. Next year we will be celebrating 150th year of Mahatma Gandhi. And I had written a small article in one of the newspapers here, in which I had mentioned that the biggest tribute to our country and to Mahatma Gandhi will be to start a movement towards volunteerism. And lots of people who had read this article, they had kind of, it had struck a chord in them, because they had seen the kind of the depths of miseries which a fellow human being can really fall into. So again, companies have started recognizing such kind of people, because I don't know whether any of the speakers in the morning spoke about this or not, but lots of global attention today is going to a particular kind of practice, organizational practice, which is called ESG. E stands for environment or environmental, S is for social, and G is for governance. So in the past, the whole purpose of working in a company, or running a company rather, was to earn profits, do well for your shareholders, give higher salaries to your employees. Not to say that this concern will not be there anymore in the future. It will remain, but it will be supplanted by something which is called ESG. Is the company contributing to environmental well-being? Are you net zero? Is your carbon footprint low? Is the company inclusive? Is it promoting social inclusion? And as you know, there are lots of marginalized groups in our country, in our society, including women as a group. So is the company taking care about these kind of issues? And finally, governance. What kind of participatory governance, etc., is being practiced? Is it a very top-down, hierarchical kind of a system? How does the company contribute to the governance in the neighborhood? Is it a responsible citizen? So these are some of the things which eventually will become much more important. And in fact, this phenomena has started from Europe. Some of the European companies actually have told that if the ESG record of our suppliers and vendors are not up to the mark, we will boycott them. We will not even look at them. And already such a phenomena has started in the pharmaceutical industry. Some of you would know this, that Hyderabad is a very large pharmaceutical industry. Our companies export to more than 100 countries in the world. And some of the European countries have actually started following this clause, that if you are representing a company or a region or a state or a country which has a poor ESG record, you need not come to Europe at all. You need not supply anything to us at all. So eventually all organizations, so wherever they are located, whatever they do, they will all come up in this ESG chain. And again, as I said, people who show these kind of traits, who are willing to volunteer, who are willing to take responsibility, who show empathy towards fellow human beings, their sufferings, they will be kind of valued, and they will have a better chance in advancing in their careers. The next, again, a COVID-related observation. Some of you might have heard of these things happening with your friends or maybe family members or someone. Again, during the first few months of COVID, during again April, May, June, etc., layoffs happened. Later on, of course, the IT industry bounced back. It showed lots of resilience, and eventually it ended up doing phenomenally well. But in the first few months, the months of uncertainty, when people were trying to save on costs, they were not sure how this pandemic will pan out, what will be the financial impact. Everyone was on a cost saving kind of a mission. Lots of existing IT contracts, existing deliveries, they were all kind of put on hold, and payments were delayed. So lots of employees had to be let go. Layoffs happened. Again, fortunately, not so many in Hyderabad as compared to other cities, but some layoffs did happen. And we had started a mechanism in the government that if anyone is getting laid off, you can kind of reach out to us. And if there is something that we can do by talking to your employer, creating some safety net for you, we'll be very happy to do. And I'm again very proud to share with you that we did support at least 100 plus employees who would have completely lost their jobs, but some arrangements were made for them for their continuation. or some kind of a transition plan was developed for them. But again, if you dive deep into this, who are the people who are getting laid off? So it is not to say that the whole company has closed down. Some of that also did happen for very, very small companies, particularly startups who were just beginning. They had 3 employees, 5 employees, the company closed. But in a mid-scale company or a small company, we did not come across any incident in which the whole company got closed down. But some members of the company were let off. So if you analyze who are these people who are getting laid off vis-a-vis someone else who is not getting laid off, there was one very clear pattern, and the pattern was that the person who was getting laid off had stopped acquiring new skills. The person had stopped learning. He was not familiar at all with the new generation technologies which are being advanced today, which are being deployed today in client interactions. He was still in maybe some 18th century or 19th century. He was still in that Pascal and Fortran kind of a world. So that became very clear, that lack of skills or lack of interest in acquiring skills. It is not lack of skills, but a sense that whatever I have learned is good enough. This will kind of see me through. And again, when a phenomena like the pandemic hit everyone, these are the persons whose assumptions, whose sense of complacency, those were all completely shattered. So this can happen at any time. But even if it does not happen, even if we feel that this pandemic was once in a generation kind of a thing, it will not happen ever again. There are lots of values in learning more, learning new things. And we have also seen that in the actual real world, people who are able to cause that differentiator because of the new skills or the new generation skills that they possess, they are again getting better deals. They are the ones who are whose promotions are getting advanced, who are leading the teams, etc. This is again a thing that most of the layoffs during COVID time was directly proportional or directly correlated to your lack of interest in learning anything new. Not that you can't learn, you don't have means to learn, but you just it's a mindset issue that there is nothing that I will benefit from learning anymore. The last observation again is a COVID-related observation. Now, this may not be true of all the companies, but many companies that many companies who work here, they also have they are part of global networks. Like they work for a company who has some team which is at the site of the client. So you may be in the same company but working in different locations already. So it was found that some employees were in an advantageous geography, like they were in US or they were in Europe or they were in some other country where also, of course, pandemic happened worldwide, but the impact of pandemic or the severity of the lockdown or some other kind of mitigating factors, they were not there as much as it was there in India. And many companies actually used such people to, in a very strategic way, to learn the best practices or give more and more work to those guys who were overseas, where there is no restriction on coming to office. Offices are open. The lockdown is not so harsh. Even if you are working from home, there are opportunities to work more hours. There's no bandwidth challenge and stuff like that. So this also has given a perspective to many companies that, see, as in the manufacturing industry, it is called diversification of your supply chain. I mean, the supply chain is coming, let us say, from 4 agencies. Instead of relying only on those 4 agencies, let me cultivate 20 more agencies. Or many items are getting sourced from China. So why rely on China always? Why not identify 5 other countries who can supply the same thing? So this diversification of supply chain phenomena is seen in the industry also, but this is knowledge diversification. So far I was relying only on my people who are in Hyderabad or Bangalore or Chennai or Gurgaon, but I also have manpower overseas, and so let me start relying on them. While they may be working for a particular client, they are eventually employees of my own company. So how can I use them in a more productive way? So very agile kind of thinking, agile kind of decision making. And again, the point which I'm trying to mention is that, let us say, 50-member team of a particular company is at the client site in the US. Not all 50 will respond to this in the same way when demands of this kind are placed upon them. 20 of them may be completely disinterested in doing any extra work, but 5 of them may feel that this is my responsibility. I'm living in the US. I have better access. I have more resources. I don't have too many restrictions. Let me help my company. So, of course, some of this happened through a financial deal as well. Like if you work more, you'll be getting more salaries and all that. But some of the people did not agree even to that kind of deal. But those who did now again have found that this is a good way in which I can take greater responsibility. I can do more of company's work, etc. So these are some of the things which today are now looked upon by senior HR people, company leaders, IT managers, etc. as characteristics which will be the most valued or the most relevant characteristics in any particular employee. Is technical knowledge, of course, I won't say that you don't need to have any concern about technical knowledge, but these are some things which are more valued. So as professionals, I guess these are some of the things which we all need to think individually. How much of these are practical? How much of these can be imbibed by me, brought into action by me? How many of us require support in doing some of these things? These are the kind of questions and answers which the forum, the network needs to provide you. But the last thing which I'll tell you is that amongst all Indian cities, I mean, my address was largely targeted to the IT industry, but there are other industries also in the city, in the state. We have a very large, gigantic pharmaceutical and biotechnology industry. We have a defense and aerospace industry. We have an industry on materials and composites and metal forging and so on and so forth. So we have multiple other work streams as well. But whatever it is, Hyderabad's reputation has always been, in fact, since decades, of very high sense of commitment, discipline, professionalism. In the IT industry itself, before COVID, people used to compare the attrition rates of Hyderabad vis-a-vis attrition rates in other cities, particularly Bangalore, as all of us know. There's a very direct competition between Hyderabad and Bangalore. And people would always say that the attrition rates in Hyderabad are far, far, far lower than in Bangalore, and the sense of discipline. In fact, many of you would be aware that whenever there will be some disruption in Chennai due to flooding or some those cyclone and all that work will be taken over in Hyderabad. Whenever there will be some agitations in Bangalore, that work will be taken over in Hyderabad. So people have always appreciated that sense of discipline, commitment, sensitivity towards deliverables, sensitivity toward timelines, and therefore on multiple indicators, this city has been ranked as the city with the highest quotient of professionalism, etc. And I sincerely wish that while we have maintained the prime position, stellar track record in delivering far beyond the expectations of our employers and clients, but due to the changes which we are seeing due to the pandemic, we need to kind of tweak our attitudes, our mindsets, our learning environments to ensure that the reputation of Hyderabad remains intact. And as I said, I'm happy that a forum like this has been created. Summits of this kind are getting organized, where each of you will get a chance to interact with some brilliant resource persons and get answers to many of the questions that they have. So once again, congratulations for a very well organized event, and thank you very much for having me.
Team, are they all ready? Set.